I'll get this Terry Wogan's our microphone. Right, thank you all for coming in. This is our last session of the day. Before we move on to that, I just thank you all very much for coming to Flight Sim 2018. I hope you've had a good day so far, and we'll finish on a high note for the presentations, and I'll pass you over to Philip from Laminar, who will talk to you about X-Plane 11 and some of the interesting things that are coming up this year. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Philip Ringler. I've been working with Laminar Research on X-Plane 11 since 2013, I think. Yeah. I'm a commercial pilot and flight instructor in my free time, so whenever I'm not programming X-Plane, I teach people to fly. It's amazing to see this big of a crowd here. That's really great. I mean, I've been doing this presentation here in course for like 3 years now or so. So always pleased to see so many people here. So the topic of today is the X-Plane 11 roadmap, and I want you to notice that it doesn't say like X-Plane 12 features or something on here, because what I want to show you is that X-Plane 11 is the platform to be on right now. It's got a lot of things coming, like free updates that you're just getting if you're on X-Plane 11. It's got a lot of things going on right now. Add-ons are coming to it. We are developing new stuff. And I like to start with a straw poll here. So walking around the exhibition, I saw so many computers running X-Plane, and it's been different. 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was running FSX, and then you could find one computer that was running X-Plane. And now it seems to be the other way around. So I want to ask the audience, but first, since Brexit hasn't happened yet, you're still in the European Union. So before I ask you, I need to get your consent that I will be looking at you for. So now that you have consented that I look at your faces when you raise your hands, who is using X-Plane 11? Well, all right, okay. Well, it's great to see so many people using X-Plane 11. So the introduction gets shorter and shorter every time, because when I do the presentation a couple of years ago, I would need to dedicate a lot of time of the presentation to explain to people what X-Plane is, and right now I guess we can keep that pretty short. So everyone knows X-Plane started out as a simulator of flight physics. Austin Meyer started that in his college dorm in 1996 because, and the story of X-Plane is the story of a failure, because what happened is Austin flunked his instrument proficiency check in 1996 because he was not flying enough, and his flight instructor didn't sign him up and said, you got to practice more. And Austin was so frustrated with that the night he came home from that failed check ride, he sat down in his dorm room and started writing what would ultimately become X-Plane. And those flight physics, the blade element theory, is still at the center of X-Plane. It's what we do best. But over the course of X-Plane's life, this one just got a few friends. With X-Plane 11, it got the new user interface and the new PBR rendering engine that just allows you to create awesome 3D models and with great textures, and with PBR they really come to life because they interact with the environment by the reflection and the clouds and everything. Then of course there's this my department, the avionics, that I use to teach students how to fly instruments. And then also with X-Plane 11 we got this great new sound engine, Fmod. It's what all the AAA titles and all the console games use nowadays, and now with X-Plane 11, with Fmod, you have the best sound engine in the industry in the simulator. So this is what you got when you originally bought X-Plane the day it came out. And since then we've been adding a few more things to it. So this year we added the virtual reality headsets. Again, straw poll, who is using some kind of like Oculus or Vive, any kind of virtual reality hardware? So maybe like 20% of the audience is using the art. Okay. All right, interesting. Then we've been starting to add the landmark cities. London here, of course, but many other cities over the world we're adding now. Then, of course, our gateway airports, which are just growing at an incredible pace, and all the objects, the Lego brick system, as we call it, that adds on to that. So this is what we deliver, but a lot of other people have jumped on the X-Plane train as well. So we are happy to welcome Orbix in the world of X-Plane add-on makers. So I'm sure many of you have been in their talk earlier today and see the kind of sceneries they do for X-Plane. So we are happy to have those really great first-rate sceneries now. Aerosoft has been working with us since X-Plane 10. So they believed in X-Plane even before it was cool, and we are very, very happy about that. Then here in the UK, of course, we have Just Flight, and they have been making great aircraft. They started making really great general aviation aircraft, like the 152. Well, it's a flying lawnmower, really, but I love this plane because I spent so much time in this plane, probably more time than any sane person should. Even flying around with that, it's a different kind of flying. You should, if you only ever fly airliners, you should really try something like that. Because fun story, last week I had a 777 freighter captain come to me, to our flying club, and say, hey, I fly the 777 for a living. It's so boring. Can we do some real flying? So I got him into our flying club and I flew 152 with him. So, and you can do the same thing next time, of course. So Fly Tampa has made their first scenery for X-Plane Corfu. Coronado has been making X-Plane add-ons aircraft also since X-Plane 9. Coronado, also one of them, you made X-Plane add-ons before it was cool. FlyJSim, their classic airliners, the 737 that we showed here at our booth. Those guys are pushing the X-Plane engine to the limit. So FlyJSim, they put the number of light sources they put in the cockpit, in the cabin, the number of lights you can not only turn on, but also dim, and you get every single light source in the cabin exactly right, and flying that at night and seeing all those lights, that's just amazing. Then, what kind of computer do you need to run a 747 on it that has like a fuel system and a pressurization system and an FMS that can load flight plans? So I don't know, that computer is actually big enough to do this. So X-Plane has a mobile version that we have been making since probably over 5 years now, and it's been coming ever closer and closer to the desktop version that right now the iPhone runs the same flight model as the desktop sim, something that was unthinkable only a couple of years ago. Then we have community-driven airports. People who have tried X-Plane 10 back in the day always complained, oh, the X-Plane world is so empty, there are no great airports. And right now, for free, not a lot of payware add-on, just with X-Plane, we ship 8,500 handcrafted 3D airports. And that is possible because of 5,600 volunteers. We, as a small team, could never make 8,500 airports. But because we give those tools to the community and the Gateway website, people have just been churning out airports at a pace that is incredible. And just with the current update with X-Plane 1130, which is in beta right now, we're adding 800 new airports that just weren't there before. So wherever you are flying, even if you don't heavily invest in add-on scenery, you are going to have like a consistent airport quality, like what you see here. So so all of these sceneries here, of course the St. Martin Island, the very famous approach where people are blown from the beach by the jet blast. All of that is an X-Plane, and it comes by default. So as I said, 800 new airports just for free, just with a free update. All right, so now that we are all on the same page of what Explain-L is and what it has, let's talk about the roadmap of what we are working on right now and what you can expect in the next couple of months. So one thing that we're shipping with Explain 1130, which is like right on the doorstep right now, is the new joystick UI. So one problem that some people have is in a real airliner, the movement of the yoke to change your pitch is like this. You have this range of movement to work your controls. And most desktop hardware that you can buy at a reasonable price only moves a fraction of the real travel. So most people struggle with the joystick sensitivity. And it wasn't really good to configure in Explain 11 up until now. And what we've come up now with is a really, really flexible system that allows you to configure each axis and define a custom response curve and a dead zone and for each axis, whether it's the throttle or the pitch axis and whatever. And you have special ranges. For example, you can configure a throttle axis to have a reverser, or you can configure a turboprop throttle to have a feather range and a beta range and a reverse range and so on. And once you've done that setup, you can save it as a per airplane configuration. So you can define an ideal joystick setup that you want to use for a helicopter, or the ideal setup you want to use for the 737. Then you save it to a file. You can share that file with your friends. And this way really get the most of your joystick and your controller hardware. We have some artwork updates in 1130 as well. For example, we have the new terminal kit. And this is an art package that gives you everything, or the scenery artists, everything they need to build. Terminal facades, the jetways, the roofs, and especially building all those custom jetways. This is something that scenery artists are really getting into right now. So for example, this is the Munich default airport as it comes out of the box with Explain. And we are really excited for scenery artists to use that now. Then we've been adding landmark cities. Last year I talked to you, we just had the first in, it was London, if I remember correctly, and we've been building onto that since then with Las Vegas and Chicago now. And in Chicago you can really see the Explain render engine not only works great with airplanes, but it really works great with scenery as well because of the amazing night lighting you can do to get the feel even the feel of the city even at night. And PBR even works on scenery. So this is not a painted on texture. This is actually a real-time rendered reflection in the beam. So, and with 1130, we are especially also improving the autogen. So we are really proud of the Explain 11 autogen system because it is amazingly fast. So if you have a graphics card that supports instancing, which basically everything of the last 5 years now does. So if you're like GeForce 700 and later, 700, 900,000, whatever, turning up the autogen will not actually decrease your frame rate. So we make use of instancing to create those really amazing scenes. So these are not actually hand-placed, so the objects are handmade, of course, but the industrial zones are just generated by Explain from OpenStreetMap data. And this is what you get with the default autogen out of the box. Like you get gas stations and industrial areas and gates and stuff. And we have been adding a lot of variety to the library now. So those different kinds of fences and all kinds of clutter you can put everywhere, like those containers and trash cans and recycling, very important. And this can be used by scenery authors. And the important part about the library object is that we Then we do great quality control on them, so they are all at a consistent level of detail, which means as long as the gateway airports, the authors that do gateway airports, they can put all of this stuff in, and it's not going to bog down the frame rate, because all our objects are consistent detail, and we really make sure that everything that goes into the default library is really fast to render. And sometimes people ask us, oh, could we have like the Mr. X library or the whatever library in the for the gateway airports? And we are always reluctant to add foreign stuff into that, not because we don't like what other people do, but because everything that comes with X-Plane out of the box should run at a really, really high frame rate. So that should really be in the, okay. I was at Chicago. Okay, we're heading New York, so Chicago is already in, New York comes in next. So X-Plane has always built the cities based on OpenStreetMap, using the AutoGen system to build what we call a plausible city scenery. And what I mean by that is, from OpenStreetMap and from FAA obstacle data, we know the height of the skyline. So the auto-generated buildings all will be at the correct height. So when you look at the skyline from some distance, it'll look correct because all the buildings are the correct relative height to one another. And with London and Dubai and Chicago and now New York, we're adding on top of that auto-generated system custom buildings that not only are at the correct height, but also look exactly like the real-life counterparts. So this way we can have the memorial and the Statue of Liberty and a look at downtown Manhattan, the Columbus Circle. The AutoGen system, up until recently, put a trailer park here instead of... so with the handcrafted cities, you don't get trailer parks at surprising locations anymore. So we're also adding Washington, D.C., and we got the White House and the reflection pool. Yeah, look at it, because this is a water body, and X-Plane applies the PBR, the physics-based rendering, to the water. Of course, you will get correct reflections in the reflecting pool. And of course, it looks great at dusk. Yeah, that's what we have in 1130 in terms of eye candy. And of course, there are people who really don't care for scenery because they only fly IFR, they fly up at 30,000 feet, or they have the visibility turned way down, and they come to us and they say, oh, X-Plane just should not be a screenshot simulator, X-Plane should be serious. So the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the stuff we put into X-Plane 1130 that people consider serious. So the flight physics of X-Plane, as I said, started out in 1996, and they have been continuously improved over the last 20 years, and Austin continues to find stuff that can be improved. So, for example, the engine types, Austin has been flying a turboprop plane with a free turbine engine for a couple of years now, and you could really see the turboprop model in X-Plane evolve as Austin was getting more and more experience flying that plane. And now all this experience is coming back to the turbofan engines as well. So with a lot of feedback also from the AERO developers who make jetliners, we are really getting a much more realistic N1 and 2 two-spool turboprop model now. We're helping X-Plane authors figure out what the coefficient of drag for their fuselage would be. So this is stuff that X-Plane authors, not so much US users, but I think we have a couple of authors in the audience as well. This is something that will really help people who make airplanes to take advantage of X-Plane's physics and make it even more accurate. Then another thing that is new in 1130 that we have looked at a spiraling slipstream. So what the prop does, it not only accelerates the air backward, but as the prop is turning, it also gives the air that it travels backwards a spin. So the air flows back from the propeller in this kind of corkscrew motion, and that airflow, this rotating airflow, interacts with the surfaces behind it. So in the case of the twin prop, the elevator stabilizer, but in case of the single, the corkscrew airflow hits the rudder from one side. And so a lot of work has gone into modeling, especially tail draggers and the way the air flows over the fuselage, even with crosswind. So if you have a crosswind, it blows the air that the prop shovels back sideways, and all of that is modeled very accurately in X-Plane 1130, and it should improve the handling of prop planes a lot. So if you don't care for prop planes, you maybe care for airliners, and something that has been going on there is the ground effect. So what happens if you fly the airplane closer to the ground? At some point, the air that is deflected by the wings, the downwash after the wings, so the air is accelerated downward, and what happens when you come closer to the ground is that that downwash hits the ground, it cannot go further down, it needs to go along the ground. And that change in airflow direction that works back onto the aircraft and changes what the airplane does, and what we found in old reports is that it changes the angle of attack by about 2.5 degrees if you don't touch anything, and if you fly an airliner of a comparable configuration, you will see X-Plane do exactly that same thing. Then another thing we were looking at, or Austin was looking at, is body lift and side force. So not only the wings generate lift, but even just the fuselage, the body going through the air creates a certain amount of lift, and of course that will change by the angle the air is going over it. So if it just gets straight, if it just goes straight through the air, it'll behave differently from when you fly it in a forward slip and the air hits it's the body sideways. So what we needed to figure out is where does the force act, and does the because we knew what the force should be, but where should it act? What moments should result from that? So we needed to figure out what the attack point of the force is, and there's really no literature on that. So we needed to test this. So what Austin came up with is he needed his own personal wind tunnel and a test object to try it, and what he said, it should be it should provide undisturbed air where he could stick out his test object in, and while he was doing that, he should be going at a constant speed on a constant track. So what he came up with was this. So this is Austin in his Tesla. The Tesla has an autopilot. So what Austin does is he goes out to a deserted road. So if you live near Austin and you're on the highway, you're fine. He's not going to do the experiment on the highway. So Austin goes out to some deserted road where there's no other traffic, and he puts the Tesla on autopilot, so it holds a constant speed and a constant track. Then he opens the sunroof and sticks out the test body and finds out where exactly, because where he needs to put this anchor point so that this thing is straight in the airflow. And this is really the experiments that were done to come up with the correct behavior of body lift in X-Plane 1130. So as you can see, exactly as we found out experimentally, the point where the force will act is about 1/3 of the way down, and this point of attack will move backwards as you slip the plane sideways, and all of that is modeled in X-Plane 1130. So whenever we change something in the flight model, we of course have the problem that add-on aircraft don't really expect that to happen. So what we've done now is we say we have a stable flight model that we keep for a certain number of versions, so example X-Plane 1120 onward. And if you use a checkbox, you opt into the experimental flight model. And this is what the add-on makers can use to test the upcoming next version of the flight model and provide feedback to us. And because right now what happens is, after the beta is over, the add-on developers try it, and then they come up with all kinds of great things and tell it to us, and Austin says, yeah, but you're too late, the beta is over. So right now we control this, or now in 11.30 we control this by the experimental flight model, which allows users and also the add-on makers to provide feedback to Austin. And then the flight model gets versioned, and then the add-on makers can say, okay, my add-on is optimized for the X-Plane 1135.1 flight model, and they keep using that for the rest of the life of their add-on, or until Austin makes something even better and they want to jump onto that. All right, still in the serious department, airplanes have other systems than only the wings and the engines to keep them in the air. And this is something that I've been working on. I've been doing the oxygen system for X-Plane, anti-ice and de-ice systems, propellers, propeller governors, autopilots for general aviation and airliners. And the reason I've done that is, as is so often the case in X-Plane, we have some kind of real-life experience that we couldn't recreate in the sim, so we needed to make the sim better. And in my case, it was I got my high altitude endorsement for flying a pressurized plane and the flight levels, and for that I needed to use an oxygen system. We didn't have anything in X-Plane, so I said, okay, I'm going to study the real-world equipment that I use for my actual high altitude endorsement, and then I'm going to put it into X-Plane. So, so with X-Plane 1130, we have two different oxygen systems. You have the pressurized bottle oxygen that the crew oxygen uses, or that you use in a small plane, and we have the chemical oxygenator system that you find in the passenger planes where you pull the mask down. Those don't actually work with a bottle, they work with a chemical oxygen generator. The next thing, very important, if you go up into the flight levels, you need to be able to react to the weather, and every now and then we get a feedback on a forum or a support call and said, I flew through this cloud in X-Plane and my plane iced over and I crashed. Your simulator sucks. And we need to provide people with a way to not crash when they fly through icing. So how do you do that in real life? Well, if you have a plane that has no anti-icing equipment, you stay out of clouds above freezing level. It's the only way to do it. But if you have a more advanced aircraft, of course, it can be equipped with anti-ice systems. And we have quite a lot of those in X-Plane 1130 now. You can have electric anti-ice, you can have what the big airliners use, you can use bleed air from the engines to just very hot air from the compressor, high pressure compressor section of the engine, and that heats up the wings or the engine cowling. And when you turn that on, you're taking air away from the combustion process in the engine. So what that does is you turn on anti-ice and you get less thrust at a higher EGT because you're taking the air away from the engine, and that is modeled in X-Plane. Then many small airplanes nowadays use TKS, which is a chemical anti-ice system where they have the leading edge of the wing is laser drilled with micro holes into it. Really, you cannot see those holes with your eyes because they are so small. And then they run this TKS fluid through it, and it seeps out in minuscule amounts through those tiny holes. And this TKS fluid prevents ice to form on the wing. So we model this as well. You put a tank in the airplane where you say, oh, I have 25 liters of TKS fluid, and then X-Plane can use that to get rid of the ice. And then the oldest system is the boots de-ice, where you have an inflatable rubber boot on the front of your wing. You let the ice build up, it needs to build for a while so it gets nice and solid, and then you turn on an air compressor that inflates the boot, and the boot expands and the ice just breaks off. And we can do that in X-plane as well. Propeller governors, that is something that I needed for instructing. So if you teach people to fly on multis, on twin engine aircraft, you need to teach people how to secure one engine if it fails in flight. There's a saying that says in a twin, if one engine fails, the other engine is there to take you to the site of the accident. So, and there's some kind of truth to that, because if you fail one engine and you don't feather the prop, you are going to lose so much performance out of the aircraft, because the windmilling prop creates so much drag, and it blankets the airflow over the wing behind the prop. So you're losing tons of lift, you're gaining tons of drag, you have this yawing force going on, it is really important to understand what that does and feather the prop in this situation. And there's many different kinds of prop setups with different governors for singles, for twins, for pistons, for turboprops, and I looked at hopefully all of them and came up with the 4 different basic systems that X-plane needs to simulate. And now you can have prop governors that fail to fine pitch, that fail to coarse pitch, those that have anti-feathering springs and those that don't. Those that go into full feather, those that have auto feather that's electrically triggered, those that have auto feather that's mechanically triggered by oil pressure, and I guess all of that is in X-plane 1130 now. You can build a fixed gear turboprop engine with a start locking system and an unfeathering prop, unfeathering pump, so you can get the engine started on the ground. We have the special governors that you find on the PT6, so in the King Air you can do lots of tests now whether the prop governor system is working correctly, and I of course use that as an instructional tool to introduce some kind of failure and then ask my student, okay, run the tests, tell me what system has failed. Alright, we're about at half time. The next big serious thing that we put in the X-plane 1130 is this guy, the autopilots. So I've looked at general aviation autopilots that I fly, position-based autopilots, rate-based autopilots. The oldest one I flew was a 1971 analog Piper autopilot that I actually got to work and flew with it, and it was kind of amazing to see this analog, no microchips, no processor, nothing, technology actually flying the airplane extremely well. And I think all those different systems can now be simulated in X-plane 1130 very, very accurately. So you can have most of those popular general aviation autopilots. And then I went a little bit out of my comfort zone and I looked at the airliners. And this picture should tell you something that the autopilot can do. Who recognizes this autopilot? And we are in the right country. It's a British autopilot. Who recognizes the plane that has this autopilot? I heard it. Trident, correct. That's the Hawker Trident autopilot. And what the Hawker Trident autopilot was, it was the first autopilot that could do full autoland. So that's why it's on this slide, not because I modeled a Trident, no, but because I looked at the features that airline autopilots should have. They should have an engine controller for N1 or EPR controlled engines. They have a different kind of control wheel steering than we use in the small airplanes. They have independent flight directors, so you can have up to 3 flight directors and 3 autopilots working with each other. So we got a dual channel and triple channel preconditions and checks, and boy, am I going to get emails on that, because people will want to make autolands and they can't get it to engage. And I have to tell them, yeah, sorry, you need to do it exactly as on the real one, otherwise the dual channel won't engage. And if you manage to set up the dual channel or triple channel even correctly, so that all the checks go well, then you get flare and even rollout guidance and the 3-axis autopilot with a directional servo that can even keep your plane on the runway in a tailwind, in a crosswind. And I have a video on that, and I want to roll it for you. So we are approaching here with 18 gusting, 23, something like that, crosswind. So the wind is coming like 90 degrees from the side. I've added some turbulence for good measure. You can see the 737 has a lot of wing flex. If you do the same thing in an Airbus, of course the Airbus wing is just stiff, but in the 737 you can really see what's going on. So you can see the autopilot riding out the crosswind, and now as it flares, you will see it actuate the rudder and drop the wing into the wind, and then it touches down perfectly on the center line. So now comes the rudder, here comes the rudder, touches down the left wheel, spoilers come up, and now the directional servo keeps the plane precisely on the center line. All right, yeah, then of course you can pull up the thrust reverser and slow down. All right, so now that we've covered the serious stuff, let's go back into graphics. And the next big thing that is coming here is obviously Vulkan. So Vulkan is there to solve precisely one problem, and the problem looks like this. The problem is your graphics card is down here, and there's only one guy at a time who can talk to the graphics card. And this is the problem we are trying to solve with Vulkan. In that Vulkan gives us the possibility to talk to the graphics card from more than one CPU at a time. And we have been working on this quite a while, so what people ask us all the time is like, are we there yet? Can we get it yet? And the reason why it's taking so long, because the Vulkan transition was started this year, I think in April or something. Since April, 2 people have been working on the Vulkan transition, is that we want to avoid doing that. This is the thing that we don't want to do, because we could have bolted on Vulkan to what we have now, and that would just have made things worse. So what Ben and Sydney have been doing is they have been rebuilding the engine for Vulkan, so that we want to make things faster and leaner and not add more and more adapter layers to it. So the good part, well, the bad news is it takes a while, because these people have been working since April, and they will be busy for a while. Oops, no, but a lot of the groundwork is already in 1130. So while X-Plane 1130 isn't running Vulkan yet, it runs, for example, the new pre-compiled shaders, and a lot of groundwork that has been gone into that has been put into modernizing the engine. So 1130 already runs much faster than 1120. And why it can do that is, so this is what we started with so the first thing that we converted to Vulkan was just the airfoil maker, and just this tiny piece of software shows how much better Vulkan is in terms of OpenGL. So what this means, driver pause, that means with OpenGL, about 18,000 times, X-Plane needed to stop, turn control over to the driver, tell the driver to do something, go to sleep, and wait for the driver to come back to it. So this is what limits you on the single-core CPU. And with Vulkan, instead of doing this 18,000 times, we only need to do about 5,500 times. So this does not translate directly to frame rate, so this doesn't mean it runs at 3 times the speed. No, I don't want to promise you that it runs at 3 times the speed, because it won't. But it tells you the kind of advantage that we are getting out of it. So, Vulkan will not bring world peace. Vulkan will not cure disease. Vulkan will not fix Boris Johnson's hair. Vulkan will not stop Brexit. Vulkan will not make the ATC better. So, but So Vulkan does not change the way X-Plane looks. So if you're expecting to switch to Vulkan and everything looks 10 times better, no, that's not what's happening. It will also not run on an 8-year-old computer with 500 frames. So Vulkan is about getting room to grow. Because where we are at right now is we cannot any more eye candy, and we cannot add any more cool stuff onto OpenGL without bogging your machine down. So Vulkan is about giving us the room for the future to keep adding more stuff that we cannot do in OpenGL. So what Vulkan does is it enables us to take full advantage of modern graphics cards. So moving to Vulkan will not make your 8-year-old graphics card faster. Won't happen. So what it does is it is optimized to run with modern graphics cards, and it enables us to do much, much more stuff on such a modern graphics card. So if you have an 8-year-old machine, Vulkan is not going to help you. But if you have a decent computer from like the last 2 years or so, Vulkan will enable us to do many more things on it and not bog your frame rate down. And even Vulkan is not even on this chart yet. This is just what we have been doing, modernizing the engine over the course of X-Plane 11. So we have the non-HDR frame rate and the HDR frame rate in dark blue. So with X-Plane 1130, things are already getting much faster without even being on Vulkan. So we're changing the underlying engine. Now many people have, of course, many add-ons for X-Plane, and they ask, oh my God, what does this mean to all the stuff that I have? The good part is the aircraft should just work. So a lot of aircraft use OpenGL to do anything in their cockpit, to render the PFD and the MFD and the electronic flight bag and the charts, and they put up a window where you can set the load manager, can set the fuel, can set the cargo, open the doors, call the stewardess, whatever. And all this stuff, even though it's done in OpenGL, it will continue to work 100% with a Vulkan-based X-Plane, because it's 2D. That's going to work. Everything that happens in 3D, so when an add-on places like a pushback truck for you, it renders a pushback truck that comes up to your airplane, hooks up to it, and pushes you back somewhere. That's obviously in 3D. Those programs will just work if they use the current APIs for X-Plane 11. If the add-on was made for X-Plane 10, then it probably won't work. Then they will need to switch to the current API. They can do that right now. They don't need to wait for us to come up with Vulkan. They just need to use the X-Plane 11 API, and if they use that, the day we switch over to Vulkan, that stuff will continue to work, and they are fine. So add-ons that draw something in 3D that is not an object. So something like a program that makes their own clouds, their own atmosphere, their own fog, haze, stuff like that, or their own rain effects on the windshield. This is something that happens in 3D that doesn't work with instancing. So this is something where the add-on maker needs to adapt to Vulkan. So this is the only category of add-ons that will not work with Vulkan initially because the add-on makers will need to adapt it. But the transition from OpenGL to Vulkan will work a lot like the transition to 64-bit. So in X-Plane 10, at some point you gained the ability to go 64-bit, and it took the add-ons a while to get onto 64-bit as well, but during all that time you could still run the 32-bit version of X-Plane. And it's going to be exactly the same with Vulkan in X-Plane 11. You can switch to Vulkan, and most of the add-ons, those I mentioned before, will just work. And if you want to use something that's not compatible yet, you will be able to use the OpenGL version for as long as there's X-Plane. All right, let's talk about all the stuff we're putting in for developers. So developers, I already talked about the sound engine they can use, the SDK they can use, the substance painter, the new. So by the way, that Bob Ross here, that is Alex Unruh, our art director. And the new thing we are adding in X-Plane 1130 is the particle system. So add-on makers can now attach particle emitters to the plane, and those particle emitters, so they can be attached to any object, and they can be controlled by keyframe tables that can be tied to custom data refs, so either the data refs of the sim or anything that the add-on maker thinks of doing. In a way, it looks a lot like Fmod. And here's, let me show you a demo of what it looks like. So what we do with the particle system, someone already asked me if we do the clouds with it. No, not yet. What we do with it, as we're adding it right now, is smoke, contrails, water spray. So what I want you to watch for in this video is the water spray and the condensation in the fans and the water that is thrown up in the air by the tires, and the water that is blown away by the jet blast. And the condensation effect over the wing. And we are providing add-on makers with the tools they need to control the effects. They can put in any data ref from the sim, or they can use custom plugins to make their own data refs for it. What I want you to watch here is the wheels. As we accelerate down the wet runway, we leave this trail of water, on the wet runway. And those effects can be edited by the add-on makers in real time. So they have this editor window, and they can change, for example, here the sootiness of the exhaust. That does not look like a healthy 737, so maybe, turn it down a little bit. That, I guess, looks better for full power. So you can edit it in real time, and add-on makers are going to be able to make amazing stuff with that. And something that only the X-Plane engine can do is that the particles interact with the rest of the scenery because they can emit light. We are not limited by like 8 or 16 hardware lights. Every single particle we emit can cast light. So what I want you to watch here is we are going to set the engine on fire, and the fire truck's not coming, so the sun sets, it gets dark, and the engine just continues to be on fire, and it's going to light up the scenery. So this is the particle engine emitting light that interacts with everything in X-Plane. So particle effects is not limited to something like fire. Particle effects can also be used to change the way you look through things. So you cannot only have fire, you can also have heat blur. So if you watch this here, you can see there's the heat generated by the fire changes the way you look through it and other things. The particles are affected by the zoom factor and the distance you look at it. So you will notice, if you look at photos of airliners net, when they are shot with a very long lens from a very great distance, with a 1,000mm lens or something, then the exhaust trail just looks enormous. And if you're standing right next to it, well, you shouldn't be standing right next to the exhaust of the engine, of course, but then it looks much more focused. And X-Plane does the same thing. So what we're going to do here is we're just changing the from a telephoto lens to going near it, and that changes the way the particles are focused. And it interacts with the rest of X-Plane. So as I put the power forward, you can really get a feel for the speed of this hot air that's coming out of the engine. And again, this looks huge now because we are standing far away and using a very long lens to look at it. It's going to look very different when you're up close to it. So here I think we put a little bit of water on the runway so you can see a little bit of spray being accelerated by the engines. All right, now to the question that is on everybody's mind. When do I get this stuff? When do I get this stuff? And the good part of the answer is most of that you can have next week. So, all the airports and landmarks in 1125, of course, that is out now. Everyone has it, of course. 1130, everything that I told you about, physics and lift and vectors and prop governors and autopilots and that stuff. All the new autogen objects, all the particle effects you just saw. All of that is already in the hands of people like Orbix and Coronado and FlyJSim. So all of the add-on makers of X-Plane, they already have it. They are running beta 3 right now. And by the way things look, we are going to, the next or the beta after this, going to release it to everyone. So we will make that publicly available, but all the people who create your favorite add-ons, they already have it. And for Vulkan, well, I showed you it's a very deep hole to dig to get all the way down, but we're doing it properly. You get many of the benefits already in X-Plane 1130 because X-Plane 1130 runs at a higher frame rate than 20. And the majority of the benefits you get already, and the future will bring the Vulkan base. All right, we have about, 10 minutes left for questions, so I'm at the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you. All right.
I'm a Mac user.
Right?
And everything you said about Vulkan, is that also true of metal?
Oh, absolutely. So what has changed is we have gone to 3 major platforms right now. That is DirectX 12 on Windows, Metal on the Mac and the iPhone, and Vulkan on Windows, Linux, and Android. But the good thing about those 3 things is the concepts are very, very similar. So the way that DirectX 12 talks to the graphics card is very similar to how Vulkan and Metal talks to the graphics card. And yes, Vulkan will be first, but we're definitely doing Metal as well. Yes, because we kind of have to, because because Apple is trying to get rid of OpenGL now. So we are aware of that, and with Vulkan we can also go to Metal as well.
As a follow-up, will that help with on the Mac?
I'm not sure if it will on the Mac. It definitely will on Linux, but I don't know whether SteamVR already works on the Mac. I don't know. Because it works on Linux. So on Linux we already have SteamVR running. We had Vulkan onto that, and X-Plane will work there. On Mac, I don't think there's anything we can do without SteamVR being on the Mac as well. All right.
Philip, I'll put you on this spot just a little bit. Regarding Vulkan, because based on what we've heard about Vulkan today, it's pretty much the same as we're in this room last year. It's coming, we've got all this going. I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Any idea on time? And another question which I know a lot of people keep asking is about ATC.
Oh, all right. So I cannot give you a time frame for Vulkan. I can only tell you that you're already getting benefits from it. I cannot tell you when exactly Vulkan is going to be in X-Plane. Oh, but I can tell you that in 1130 we will already have much of the benefits of the new ATC system. All right, that was in the presentation because I'm really not an expert on ATC. What Chris has done is he has moved the ATC system on a custom text-to-speech engine that is, I think, from Amazon. And those voices are really, really amazing because they don't sound like a robot. They sound like a person talking to you. So they are as good as the wave-based system. But it comes with thousands of pre-compiled, for example, airport names. We have a list of, I don't know, probably 5 or 8,000 airport names that it will pronounce accurately to not clear you to Kilo, Bravo, Oscar, Sierra. It can tell you clear to Boston, and it'll pronounce that correctly. So yeah, this is already going to be in 11:30, and Chris is working really hard to move ATC along in that direction. Yes.
Are you looking to work on better anti-aliasing once you get Vulkan working, for example, temporal anti-aliasing?
I don't know, because I don't do Vulkan. That would be a question you would need to ask Ben Supnick. So if you need an answer right now, you need to email Ben, because I don't know, I can tell you.
Hi, Mo Media. There's about 120 people watching, so there's a lot of questions.
Great, thanks.
Common question, cloud transparency and shadows.
Cloud transparency and shadows. Oh, you mean that you're looking down onto an airport through a cloud layer and the light comes through to the cloud layer. That has been fixed for 11:30. So Ben has finally been. People have bugged Ben enough finally, I guess, that he sat down for a couple of days and moved things around in the rendering engine. And yes, the lights shining through clouds issue is fixed in 11:30. Yes.
So one thing X-Plane is quite infamous for is the big black environment-destroying cone of air-killing smoke that comes out of the jet engine aircraft. When will you guys finally bring in white puffy water vapor for the contrails?
Well, as I told you, next week, because the as of 11:30, the old puff-based smoke system has been turned off and has been replaced by the particle system. So the contrails are now generated by the particle engine, and that also means that all the aeromakers can really fine-tune the exhaust or the contrails to look exactly like they want them to. They will be able to do that. All right. Yeah.
There's basically maybe rumours, maybe inside information on that, and the change in the shaders that are coming in are going to make it much harder to tell them wrong. Or like active scanning, progression you were making developing that product to improve the clouds. Is that true, or is this going to affect harder then to push that product?
Well, they will not be able to change to just change our shaders like you were able to in X-Plane 10. In X-Plane 10, you could just you could take the text file, change the shader, make it do something else. That is no longer possible because the shaders are pre-compiled now for every set of graphics card feature set now. And they will need to adjust their rendering for Vulkan anyway. I think they are in contact with us. If they are not in contact with us, they should be in contact with Ben to get the information on Vulkan they need. So if they were planning on just doing it with hacking the shaders, no, that is not going to work. That is true. All right, yeah.
Does the new range of Nvidia cards offer any advantage for it?
We are not sure yet because no one on the team has got one yet. I think in more general, the newer the card is, the more the benefit from Vulkan will be. But since we don't have an RTX 2080 yet, I can't comment on specifically what the new Nvidia cards will do. All right, another question from the stream.
About flickering cloud shadow. I've personally had that issue.
Sorry?
I have that issue personally.
Okay, I'm not exactly aware what you're referring to. If you're referring to the clouds not working in VR, that has been fixed in 11:30, as far as I know.
I can show you a video later.
All right. Okay. So I'm not sure. Without looking at the bug tracker, I couldn't tell you. All right. Another question.
Have you got any plans to accommodate endpoint with separation by any chance?
Huh?
Frequencies?
Oh, that's in 11:30 already. So explain. The radios already have the 8.3 kilohertz since I think in X-Plane 10. I added 8.3 kilohertz already in X-Plane 10, and now with X-Plane 11 and 1130 and World Editor 1.8. You can put the 8.3 kilohertz channels in World Editor, so you can make the scenery. As you make the scenery, you can assign the correct comms channels. The radios and X-Plane already could do it, and the ATC can do it as well now. So yeah, with World Editor 1.8, you can start making airports with the new channels, and X-Plane 1130 will interpret that correctly, and it'll work with the ATC, yes. So somewhere back there I saw a hand. Go ahead.
I have a question about the ER. You touched on it earlier on, but are there any plans to improve on that? I found that some third-party algorithms aren't fully VR.
Right. Not really to the tools. I think we've made all the things that we use on our default aircraft public. So all the configurations and tweaks and the new manipulators and everything, the new manipulators are in the latest Blender plugin. So I think we have given add-on makers all the tools they need. But it's just going to take them some time to use them. And with some airplanes, it's going to be easy. So for example, all the new Coronado airplanes, I think, are fully VR compatible, the new releases. With airplanes that do a lot of custom 3D drawing, like for example the Flight Factory Airbus that has the custom water effects on the windshield, that is going to be harder for them because they will need to change the way they render stuff in 3D. But yeah, I think as far as tools and documentation goes, we have given add-on makers everything they need to get their add-ons compatible.
I use TrackIR
Right.
and I find sometimes, especially with the default aircraft, it's quite clunky and weighty, and my head's constantly going out the side of the airplane. Maybe I should keep my head still, but are you guys doing anything to fix TrackIR?
I'm not aware of any TrackIR specific issues. While I occasionally use it myself, I have the old clip-on, not the LED one, but the reflective one. I'm not aware of any issue in X-Plane there, really. All right, so it's 5:30. Thanks everybody for coming here, and
thank you all for coming. There's still about a few more minutes of the show to go for whoever wander around. Thanks again for attending, it was brilliant. Thank you.
the way it works is the lever in the cockpit is tiny. And that is yeah, exactly. And that is exactly the search in the data that you will find out. And this is how you get the target speed of the prop. This is because the blue lever is the cockpit, the target speed for the prop governor. So by changing this data, the blue now will move. So if you set that to the lowest 2% of the range it will go, the lowest 2% extent will say, oh, he's not asking for 1 RPM, he's asking for this. So what you need to do is set the prop RC to below 2% of what the plane gets from this and then you'll get the prop. Well, I think that's No, I don't think what we that's not that. This is really down to down to what the headset and the way you look at it through the lenses right now in the center of your vision, it apparently still doesn't have nothing. So this is something I guess we will have to wait on the hardware. Yeah.
And then maybe move it around via an external application. That's pretty simple, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a if you're doing it the X-Plane 11 way through the instancing API, you load the object once